Hey guys, hope you're all having a great day. So I wanted to make this video because I think this is an extremely important thing to talk about, at least in the eastern United States for sure. For those of you that already know me, I usually make a lot of videos in relation to plants and what I do in the garden, so this is a little out of what I usually do, but I think it's too important to not talk about once I did learn about this. Just a quick little background. I am taking some classes at the University of Rhode Island, so I'm hoping you can take the information I give as trustworthy as I learned it from professionals in this field. And we started talking about spotted lanternfly as a huge insect issue in the eastern United States. The class that I learned about it in is called Introduction to Plant Protection, and it's an extremely important class which talks about all different kinds of issues that are in relation to protecting plants. So if you've never heard of a spotted lanternfly before, it's actually a really pretty insect. It actually is something you wouldn't really want to kill just because of the way that it looks. But it's an incredibly invasive species that originally was native to somewhere in Asia. And it was brought to Pennsylvania most likely by accident. What they ended up thinking how it got here was they lay their egg cases pretty much on anything. And so it's very likely that as pallets of stones that were used for landscaping or something like that was brought in overseas on a ship, a spotted lanternfly could have laid egg cases on one of the rocks, and they're very hard to find. I'll throw a picture on the screen so you can see what they look like. They're very, very hard to see. So they can overwinter on those, and they probably made it to somewhere in Pennsylvania. I believe that was back in 2014 when that first started. And the population of these spotted lanternflies started off in Pennsylvania, kind of around the Philadelphia area, slowly spread from there, and then it kept spreading, and they kept quarantining different counties. And now, in the last few years, it's just exponentially gone up to the point where now they're starting to see it in places like Michigan. Here in Rhode Island, there's been a couple of spottings, not necessarily any infestations, but spottings, and this is in 2022, the time that I know all this information. But even in the western states, they've noticed it in California, Oregon, and Washington, I believe. So not too much in the Midwest, nothing there yet, but we're seeing it in multiple locations, and it is quickly spreading, so it's not to say that it isn't going to go to those areas. And if you don't know what a spotted lanternfly looks like, it's a really interesting insect because it has spots on it. It reminds me a little bit of a ladybug, but doesn't really look like a ladybug. It's got different colorations to it, and they're generally gray when the wings aren't open, so they can hide a little bit if you only see one or two of them. But the other thing about them is they definitely tend to congregate a lot on one plant. So I've seen plenty of videos from Pennsylvania and other areas around where they'll cover an entire tree trunk, and it's honestly nasty to look at. I've mentioned about the spotted lanternfly, but I guess the real question is, what does it do? Why is it so bad? So there's many different types of insects that eat in different ways, but one of the main things that people focus on with insects is their mouth parts. Again, this is stuff that I'm learning in my classes, and they have what's called rasping, sucking mouth parts. So what they end up doing is they actually kind of pierce a leaf, a deciduous leaf. They don't really touch conifers, and then they actually suck out the juice from inside, all the liquid from inside of these leaves. And they tend to go to a lot of sweeter plants. Grapes in particular are a very hard hit plant, and I'll get a little bit more into that in a second. But they just suck on all of the leaves, and they honestly deplete the trees and all the plants of their nutrients, and that's how they feed. Because they tend to feed on sweeter plants, they end up excreting honeydew, which is instead of having feces, they have honeydew, which is kind of like a sweet liquid. And what this honeydew does is it can get on other leaves and other plants, either the plant that they're on, or if they're on a tree, it can get below and go to other plants below that as well. And honeydew is notorious for attracting sooty mold, and sooty mold is not a good thing for plants. It can do a lot of damage to plants, and that's primarily where there is a lot of damage to these plants that it's causing, is through sooty mold. So I was speaking about plants that it feeds on, but the two main plants that it actually does end up feeding on is grapevines and then tree of heaven. Those are the two main ones that I have known to actually die from these insects, but there's so many other plants that have been affected. They're pretty much generalized feeders. That's kind of what they're called. So they'll feed on a lot of stuff, but they tend to go towards more like sweeter stuff. So you'll see them a lot on different fruit trees and things that produce like sweet fruits. But grapevines have been killed. There's actually, I'll see if I can find a picture. There's actually been like entire vineyards that have been destroyed by these, and that's where there's such a main concern, is that, you know, what's going to happen to a lot of these grapevines and vineyards that are around. The other thing isn't, I guess it's still a concern, but not as much of a concern. It's Tree of Heaven. Tree of Heaven is also native to Asia, so it makes sense that they would go back to a plant where they probably are more familiar with. But Tree of Heaven is also an incredibly invasive plant too. So, I mean, I'm not going to say that it's like a good thing they're going to that or a bad thing. I haven't heard any professionals in the field really speak on if that is a good thing or a bad thing, but they have been known to also kill Tree of Heaven. So after learning this information so far, I'm sure the next question in your mind is, what can we do to stop it? So the biggest thing with these insects is that they don't actually have any type of predator in the United States. There's nothing really stopping these right now except for, honestly, themselves. So I know in Rhode Island, where it's becoming an issue, but it's not necessarily an infestation, they're actually going to start spraying for it. It actually has been on the news recently. They're going to start spraying the areas where they know that they are, to try to keep the population down and try to kill what they can. It's not really the best means of taking care of it, but it's all that we really know so far. All we really know that we can do is use pesticides, but I know that there's also researchers that are trying to figure out some other type of biological control where they can use some other insect to take care of these. But the spotted lanternfly are different from a lot of other insects that are similar to them, so that's kind of where the issue lies, is that it's not like when we had an issue with stink bugs in the past. This was something they had mentioned. There was an Asian stink bug that started to take over, but it had natural predators that people released into the environment, and these predators ended up basically keeping the population in check, and now the Asian stink bugs just kind of live along the other American stink bugs and other natives that are here, and they kind of just cohabitate together. But with spotted lanternfly, there's nothing else that's very similar to it, so it's not likely something like that is going to happen, at least on its own. The best thing I can say is what you can do after watching this video is certainly, you know, if you find out anything else about spotted lanternfly, share that with other people. Share what information that you learned from this video with other people. I would greatly appreciate if you did share this video with other people, because that'll definitely help me out. But I also just want to make this just to give out as much information as I can so more people are aware about it. But besides that, you also should kill any spotted lanternfly that you can find that is like the actual information that was given out. Just kill what you can find. I've seen a lot of people on TikTok use water bottles on trees, especially in Pennsylvania where they have these large infestations on the trunks. They actually just like take the cap off of a plastic water bottle and just like put it up against the insect on the trees, and they actually like trap them because they try to fly away and they just fly into the bottle. So that's a great way of taking care of that as well. And then report any to your local extension office. Just so that way, in case you're in a county or an area where nobody else has spotted it yet, or if you've noticed that maybe some other people have spotted it but haven't noticed an infestation, there just can be more information to say, hey, I have it in my area as well, so this is really becoming an issue. So just keep an eye out for them as you're looking around. Look on trees, look on any grapevines or fruit trees that you can see, and there's a higher chance you're going to see them on those types of plants, but they're pretty much anywhere. So besides that, what's the good news? It's kind of a scary thing to talk about. There's somewhat good news. It's not great, but I'll mention two different things. One is that in the areas where they were first found in Pennsylvania, we've noticed that in like last year and this year, 2021, 2022, those areas where it was primarily the highest at one point, it almost seems like it's starting to form like a ring around those areas where it is highest and starting to move outwards. Whereas in those central locations, those populations have started to decrease a little bit, and they said that researchers are actually somewhat having a hard time finding them. And they think the main reason why this is happening is actually mostly because spotted lanternflies are depleting their food sources. They're actually running out of food in those areas because they've killed so many, you know, grapevines, tree of heavens, things like that. And they just don't have the resources necessary to continue. But unfortunately, it's also very likely and very possible that their food sources aren't all dead and they can continue growing back, so they might go back to those areas after. So we're not sure if the spotted lanternfly will just continue to move out and it'll be like a big wave that happens over the course of a few years and then it'll kind of die out on its own. The same thing happened with spongy moths, which were commonly known as gypsy moths, but the proper term is spongy moth now, where that did naturally happen with them. It was really bad for a few years and then they ended up kind of taking themselves out. But researchers aren't entirely sure if that's going to happen or not with spotted lanternfly. So that's why it's best to just kill what you can. And then the other good piece of news is, again, it really only seems like they kill tree of heaven and grapevines. For other plants, it seems like it's more so just minor damage or they're more of a stressor for the plant. So, you know, fruit trees and other plants like ornamentals and that kind of stuff, they might be stressed that year or a few years that the spotted lanternflies are in your area, but might not necessarily die from them, and it's mostly just during that feeding time. But it's definitely still a good thing to check. I also know that there was a researcher mentioning if you have them in your own yard and if you like to garden and have a lot of ornamentals and a lot of really pretty stuff, try not to treat everything with pesticides because that's not necessarily going to fix the solution. If you have particular plants that you really, really want to keep, that you don't want anything to happen to, you can treat those with some sort of pesticide. If not, you can just, you know, check on your plants frequently, get rid of any spotted lanternflies that you can find, and then again, report it to your local extension if you're able to. So that's pretty much all I wanted to share on spotted lanternflies. I also just wanted to end this by saying I am no professional in this field. I learned this from watching a, like, basically kind of seminar type of thing, where I learned a lot of information about it. And I just learned about it also in my class as well, just speaking with other students and my professor. So I only have basic knowledge on it, but I'm going to link some resources down that I know are trustworthy that you, if you want to look into any more information and just dive more into spotted lanternflies, I'm going to do that as best as I can. But I hope you guys like this video. I just want to spread awareness to this because it's such an important topic, and I feel that it's my responsibility that once I learn about it, that I should share it with others, and I really hope that you guys do the same. Again, if you don't feel like explaining the whole thing, you can share my video with other people, and hopefully this will give them a quick rundown of what spotted lanternflies are. But if not, there's plenty of other resources out there. So, and if you have any other questions, I'm sure you can contact your local extension, and they can answer any questions that you might have in case you end up having this type of issue in your own areas. So besides that, I hope you guys like this video. I will certainly update you if there's any other insect issues or large issues in relation to, you know, agriculture and horticulture as I learn them. But besides that, I will see you guys in the next video.